Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to be here with you on National Coming Out Day to talk about national cannabis news with me, your host, Cassin Coleman. I think it's a good time to talk about National Coming Out Day and its prevalence in my life and the years I have spent reminding people that they may feel like they don't know any gay people, but certainly they know me if I am talking to them. So if you're listening, know that you are like, this is real. There are still queer people out there that don't feel safe. Because they don't feel safe, they don't feel like they can tell people. That causes harm. What harm, you might say? Whatever do you mean, Cassin? And I will tell you that can mean as little bit of harm as they just feel bad about themselves for that day, but it can be in a lot of harm that they feel so bad about themselves that they take their own lives. This happens. It still happens across this country. The prevalence for queer youth is still like 4 times as high as all other youth that are out there taking their own lives. It's not cool. We have to do something about it. There's a lot of like crazy politics that are going on out there making people feel unsafe. And I feel like it's important to talk about that, especially on, the big National Coming Out Day of the year, which, maybe is yesterday, maybe it's today, but certainly I'm celebrating it now. And I feel like everybody else should be celebrating it too. One of the things that I wanted to share with you guys as well is talking a little bit more about what it's like to be assigned female at birth and what that can do to how you experience the healthcare system of our country, as well as what it's like to age into a body that is assigned female at birth. I feel like sometimes people completely forget that. That's not okay. And I think that there's a lot of news out there lately. Like there's a lot of apps that talk about what it's like to be in a body that was assigned female at birth. And sometimes I think that they forget about communicating that information to people. I might be an educated person, but I'm still finding out things all the time, things that probably someone should have mentioned to me before last week or yesterday. So we're going to talk about that a bit today too. We're going to go through the normal items as well, right? We're going to talk about cannabis bust around the country. We're going to talk about what's going on at Capitol Hill, which is basically all focused on election. You may be sick of it. I am already sick of it, but it is what we have to talk about right now, and the conversation around cannabis continues to change between both candidates. We're going to take a focus on cannabis science and how it impacts the symptoms from perimenopause and menopause in people who have been assigned female at birth. And then we're really going to dig deeper into what Director Hannah from the Cannabis Regulatory Agency here in Michigan is asking for us to do regarding MCT oil in the field. I feel like it's a good topic to come out on. But we're going to go ahead and leave that to the bottom of the hour. We're also going to go ahead and talk about what's going on with a new disciplinary report that just came out. All right, so let's go back up to the top of the hour. All right, cannabis bust. Okay, so I know we cover this every single time. It's still got to be done. You may be somewhere where you think cannabis is legal. If you were in the United States, you are wrong. It is still federally illegal. They can still take your rights away. They can still put you in prison. Last year, even with over 35 states having legal licensed programs, in those states, over 227,000 people were put in prison for cannabis. More than 80% of those people was for simple possession. Okay, we're not talking about violent criminals here. Okay, we're not talking about international drug traffickers. We're talking about normal people like you and me going to prison for this plant. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about some states that have licensed legal programs but are still busting citizens left, right, and center because of this plant and what we need to do to fix that, right? So in the past 2 weeks, we've had a number of arrests for unlicensed operations specific for cultivation in Nevada. Come on now. It's Nevada. I feel like people have been getting weed in Nevada for longer than anybody else, maybe California longer. Okay? What are we talking about here? Why are citizens being arrested? Why are citizens being charged? They're getting arrested and they're getting charged because it's still a Schedule 1 substance. And licensed legal operators don't want to compete with unlicensed traditional market operators. They just don't want it. They don't want you to be able to have plants in your backyard. And they certainly don't want you to be able to have thousands of plants in your backyard, right? So, that's happening there. It's happening in California. California has doubled down on enforcement of unlicensed operators. They have been putting more citizens away for this plant than even places like Texas, which hasn't been getting mentioned very often because now they're allowing lots of hemp products masquerading as cannabis products, which are actually cannabis products because they come from the same plant, right? Because you're not seeing quite as much there. I'm wondering if this year we'll actually see that California has prosecuted more people for cannabis crimes than Texas for the first year in like the last 20 years. I really hope that's not the case, but it's kind of how it feels. We continue on. Now we're seeing more people getting busted in New York. New York was originally just focusing on retailers, but now they're going on after unlicensed cultivators and unlicensed pet processors as well. So if you were growing in New York and you do not have a license, maybe you should stop because they're looking for you. I realize the war on drugs is not effective. There's still a lot of people getting arrested there. Your workers are going to get arrested. They're going to go to prison. You won't be able to get a license moving forward. They're saying all kinds of crazy shit out there. There's lots of legal cases trying to prevent them from doing it. Those legal cases are failing, though. So, you really got to think about what you want to do and how you're going to do it. And, sometimes I think, man, if people just wouldn't do it. And then I think, well, if people didn't do it, then nobody would have access, right? Because clearly, if people are doing it, it's because somebody wants the access to the plant. And there's not enough access to the licensed legal markets. Otherwise, people wouldn't do things outside of the licensed legal market, right? It just wouldn't be competitive, right? If there was a surplus in the licensed market, if it was Canada and people were just throwing the weed away because there's too much, right? No one would be doing it. Like it's kind of like a vicious cycle here, right? So I know that that's the case, and it's going to continue being the case because prohibitionists want to shut us down. They didn't want us to exist to begin with. They made it very difficult to get licensure, right? Even in places like Oklahoma, which I challenge anyone to disagree with me when I say that it was easier to get a license in the state of Oklahoma than any other state, but maybe I'm wrong, okay? They are working with the DEA to bust unlicensed cultivators. So even in places that have a low burden to joining the industry, people are still doing things outside the licensed market. And again, they're doing it because they can, because there is a market for those products. So maybe legislators that are out there that might be listening or paying attention to these kinds of things. The war on drugs doesn't work. Costs a lot of money to do raids. Costs a lot of money to break into people's homes and businesses. Costs a lot of money to put people in prison. Do we really want to be doing that over this plant? Could we not just legalize? Why haven't we done that yet? Why can't everybody just grow in their homes? Let's think about what that looks like, right? Another state which, doesn't have a licensed legal program yet, just has a pretty elaborate hemp program, is Georgia. There's a lot of people that are being arrested for importing there. Really looks like most of those people are coming from Florida. Maybe they were just, running away from a hurricane. Who knows? But citizens arrested and charged, again, for this plant. So we're talking all across the country here. We're talking about the Midwest, we're talking about the West Coast, we're talking about the East Coast. And if we focus in a little more on the East Coast, we're going to see a huge multi-state bust happen on the East Coast, okay? And we're talking like unlicensed operators across like 7 states, and why were they so angry? Because of the money laundering. Now, this is where I really start to scratch my head. Because do you think people would launder the money if they were allowed safe banking? And I wonder, too, if like, the whole principle of being in trouble for money laundering is because you're doing activities that are legal and you can't get the money into the legal system. If the activity is no longer illegal, then the money laundering goes away, right? Again, legislators that are out there, like, you could make it so banking was legal and there would be more tracking and, workers might be safer. I mean, there are so many things that we could do if we legalized this plant so that nobody was going to prison for it any longer. Like, and the other bad behavior that comes from it, like, deciding that you don't want to fucking pay your taxes and other such things, right? And robberies because you're walking around with big bags of cash, those things go away. Right? You don't need assault rifles to protect your debit card, probably. Okay? But if people don't have access to banking because substances are illegal, then you're going to have more violence and you're going to have more criminality because you're creating criminals by creating laws for people having access to a plant that they've had access to for generations that you just decided randomly in the 60s that they couldn't have anymore. You should think about that, right? And as a citizen, right, if you're consuming the plant, think about your neighbors that can't, right? You know, here I am in Michigan and all those people in Indiana are just suffering. Those poor Indianians. Or Indian. I'm not entirely sure what they are, right? Or the people in Nebraska, right? Or people in Kansas. Okay, there's not a lot of states that don't have programs anymore, right? There's 38 states with licensed legal programs now. Like, there's only 3 states that have nothing at all, right? Kansas, Nebraska, and Idaho. Come on, right? We can fix this together. We can fix this. And until we do, there's going to be another 250,000 people in prison for this plant. And I want you to think about that. Okay, let's just do a back of the napkin calculation here. We put another 250,000 people in prison. It's around $49,000 a year to keep them in prison. Guys, that's $12 billion to keep cannabis prisoners in prison just from last year's people who were arrested for the plant and prosecuted and imprisoned. Not the people who are also already in, right? Which, you know, is a constant rotating amount of people. But think about that. And that doesn't include the court fees. It doesn't include the cost of the police department doing the work and investigating. It doesn't include any of that. That's just locking them up. That's it. $12 billion a year. Sounds pretty crazy to me. Sounds like a reason to not be doing it. I mean, if what would $12 billion do if we used it in a different way? I don't know. We could use, what we could use it for? Education? You know, for each student, that's like an extra $25 for every student in the nation if we just stop prosecuting cannabis crimes, right? Again, 80% of these arrests and prosecutions and imprisonments were for possession, right? Not drug dealing, not trafficking, you know, not cultivating. Like, literally, I'm walking down the street and I get stopped by a police officer and I have cannabis in my pocket and I'm going to jail. That's ridiculous. It was ridiculous 20 years ago. It was ridiculous 5 years ago. It was ridiculous last week. It's still ridiculous today, right? It's a plant. It's not hurting anybody. Possession isn't hurting anybody. This is ridiculous. All right. So we want to talk about a little bit more about being ridiculous. Let us lean into how ridiculous this election season is being. Okay. And I want to focus it really tight on cannabis. Okay. So a few weeks ago, Trump came out super excited. Let's make sure that Florida gets to have recreational weed. And talking about like rescheduling and having support for that. It was a 100% pivot. It has not been the stance of the GOP ever. But hey, Trump went ahead and said it. I'm okay with Trump saying that. And then this past week, what does he go on down and do again? He says drug dealers should receive capital punishment. In case you're not sure what capital punishment means, that means they should be killed by the government on death row. They should be executed. And he said if we did that, the drug problem would go away, like right away. He hadn't said this in about 9 months, and he said it this past week. And, you know, I don't know if it's just some crazy rhetoric. I guess it could be. But it seems pretty intense that he rallied around killing cannabis users and dealers and cultivators in other international countries when they were literally macheting people to death in the streets, summary executions. And he seems to like it quite a bit. And he said it again, that this is what we should be looking for, that we won't have a drug problem in the United States anymore because he's going to make these people, these drug dealers, will no longer be willing to do it because he will kill them if they do. Wow. Like, I wish I had a soundbite for you, but I don't actually want to put his face on my stream. I don't put any politicians' faces on my stream. So that's kind of where that is. And, on the flip side of that, right, Vice President Harris came out and cleared the plane for legalization, was clear about her path, talked about it distinctly, why she wanted it to be that way, how she had done this in the past, and, her vice president-elect, Tim Walz has already legalized as governor, right? So we know where he stands. I just thought that was really quite interesting. I like the idea of, when Trump and Vance say that they're going to leave things up to the states, but if we're going to leave things up to the states, including capital punishment for drug dealers, I think they're confused. And for me, confusion is literally prohibitionists like magic, right? To keep the plant locked down, to make sure that not everybody has access, right? To keep things expensive, to make it so you can't grow in your own home, right? A plant that like literally is a weed that will grow like you don't accidentally because you dropped the seed on the ground, right? So, I don't want to see that, and I feel like other people don't want to see that, but I don't want to talk too much more about what's going on with the election. We've got like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, less than 30 days left before it happens, so we'll all find out pretty soon anyway. All right, so on to the next subject. Let's talk about cannabis and people who are assigned female at birth and those people who might experience perimenopause or menopause. And there's a lot of different ways this happens, right? Like this can be chemical because you're receiving like chemotherapy treatment. This can be surgical because, you had like, I don't know, tumors or cancer on your ovaries and it had to be removed. It can be drug induced because you're, also experiencing other issues like endometriosis and those kinds of things. And it also naturally happens in bodies that were assigned female at birth. We see this happen. We know that this happens. The crazy part is do we know when it starts happening, right? So a little bit of sciencey bits here. Rip Von Stinkel, I agree. He has said that he is going to kill drug dealers for the last 5 years. He had not said it in 9 months, and I thought he had changed his mind. Clearly, he has not. Thank you. I appreciate that comment. It is 100% a little bit crazy there. Because, you say something outlandish once. Okay, maybe you were having a bad day and you were, riffing. You say it dozens of times at multiple rallies across dozens of states across 5 years. Maybe it's a little less riffing and a little bit more like future policy decisions. And it's weird too, like literally it's a flip from we should 100% legalize and that would be good for everybody, and then like literally 2 weeks later, no, all drug dealers should be shot. Like police, if you see a drug dealer, police should have the right to shoot them. We should have capital punishment. If we had capital punishment, our drug problem in the United States would go away. A couple times people had said that they thought that this was for like other drugs, and I was like, okay, let's look at what that looks like. You know how many other drug dealers there are? It's like less than 5% of all the arrests. Okay, yeah. So how are police gonna distinction that, right? Like you're a drug trafficker for a Schedule 1 substance. I mean, half the substances people are like up in arms about for being, the bad ones aren't even Schedule 1. Right? They're Schedule 2 or 3. These ones that people get all crazy about. Like, it makes no sense at all to be like, it's only going to apply to, like, these other drugs that are not even the worst drugs on the books, but not apply to the worst drugs on the books. I mean, I guess he could be like, except for all the drug dealers that are selling the ganja. But I don't think that's going to be the case. In any case, okay. So, the crazy news here is that about 30% of people who are assigned female at birth start perimenopause in their mid-30s. How insane is that? Okay? And then about 30% started in like their early 40s, and then another 30% started in like their late 40s. And then almost everybody is finished by their mid-50s or early 50s. Right? Some people sooner, some people later. Again, there's surgical things, drug things, chemotherapy, etc. that can cause all of this. But, like, nobody talks to anybody about how these symptoms impact you. And it could be all kinds of shit. It's anxiety, it's depression, it's not wanting to eat, it's not wanting to sleep, it's like ridiculous fatigue, it's hot flashes, it's all the things you've ever heard about any movie with women of a certain age. Yes, those things. And more, right? And here's the cool part, okay? Seriously cool part to me is that cannabis helps with like 50% of all those symptoms. Okay? Having some anxiety? There's some weed for that. Are you not feeling like sleeping? There's some weed for that. Are you struggling with pain because your hormones are going all over the place and your cycle is all crazy and you're having ridiculous cramps and muscle pains? Cannabis helps with that. There are even strains like the one that I grow, Jelly Bean, at my cultivation facility here in Michigan, that work and have been specifically, engineered, grown, phenotypically selected for dealing with these issues, right? There are products, there are ointments, there are edibles, there are suppositories that are designed to help with this. Now, you don't really hear about these. I think it's crazy that we don't hear about them. I think it's crazy that there has been research on, whether or not people using cannabis use more or less benzodiazepines, but there hasn't been a lot of research on how it will help every assigned female at birth human on the planet going through a change that every single one of them will go through unless they die young. Like, why haven't we done research on that? So I did a little digging. There were about 3 studies, and then I did a little bit more digging, and I realized that there just haven't been studies on perimenopause, right? Like, there's 30,000 clinical trials on cannabis in the United States. 30,000. Not one of them had anything to do with perimenopause or menopause. Right? Then I was like, maybe nobody cares about women. And so I started digging more. And there are a few institutes now that are looking at this. But really, it's very far and few between. Right? So here is an opportunity for cannabis science to lean in and really make a difference in the lives of more than half of the humans on the planet that are going to experience this massive physical hormonal change, right? That cannot be stopped and will happen to all of us. It's like death and taxes. You're going to experience this. So I wanted to go ahead and put that call out there, let everybody know that research does need to be done, that it's important research, and that, the most recent study that was done on this was done in Canada, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that the Canadian government has done this, given that the United States government has done nothing to fund this kind of research or do this kind of study. And really what we found, which I thought was pretty important, was that there are lots of symptoms that cannabis helps with, okay? But hot flashes is not one of them. Indeed, what they showed was that the average person that consumed cannabis was going to have more hot flashes for longer durations and that they would be less pleasant. And if you haven't had a hot flash yet, you're lucky. Okay? I have experienced this. It's terrible. I do not want to experience it again. And certainly now that I know that cannabis could make my hot flash worse, I am not going to lean towards my volcano and take a big hit while experiencing one. Because I thought, man, I'm in a lot of pain. Cannabis will help with this. And it definitely didn't. And now I have some science telling why. I think it's important to have these conversations. And I think it's important to talk about things. Like last week, I didn't really know what was going on in my body. My wife didn't really know what was going on in her body. And, if we look at it, we say, hey, here's all these hormonal changes. Like these kinds of things happen. We are people of a certain age that are going to experience these things. And they come out of the blue. Right? You don't expect them to happen at all. They're completely off a normal cycle that you get used to when you're assigned female at birth and you come in through and out of puberty. It's just like this like clockwork, and all of a sudden the clock is out the window and the world is really negative. This happens, and it is a real issue for people who are assigned female at birth all over the planet in the United States. Your neighbors, your friends, your mom, your girlfriend, all those people, they're experiencing this. Think about it. Starting at like 35 forward, right? You're going to start experiencing these things. So you're going to, more depression, lack of sleep, more anxiety, all of these things being influenced in our bodies based by these hormonal changes, right? So that's the science part here that I want to share with everybody. You know, I missed an entire day last week because of this. That's pretty crazy. And, you know, if we can't talk about it, it's never going to get better. All right, so moving right along. Okay, what's going on here in Michigan? All right, so the new rules are not out yet. Director Hannah came to the MICIA event recently here in Lansing, just this past Tuesday, and he said, hey, he submitted them to the legislature. They're waiting for them to come back. They can't do anything until they come back. They can't even present them to us for 30-day public comment until they come back from the legislature. So if we want them to hurry up, we can give them a call. So if you want the new rules to happen sooner, you need to give somebody a call. And I think that it's a little bit crazy to think that, you know, the legislature might be sitting on these, given that we've all been waiting like 2.5 years for these to come out. But maybe they are. Maybe, again, election. That's all they're thinking about. And so, of course, they're waiting on it. Right? Director Haddon has asked for them to be reviewed quickly. I have reached out and asked for them to be reviewed quickly. You know, I'd like to see them, you know, I don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks, but for sure, let me tell you, if they come out, I'm going to do a whole show just on reviewing them. Maybe 2 shows, because he said it's a complete rewrite. Every single rule is different now. Complete rewrite. Even the numbers will be different. The only number that's staying the same is 420 because he decided he needed to keep that, which I appreciate, because 420, which was 5 minutes ago. I hope you're enjoying yourselves. If you're not, probably you're at work or something, and I'm sorry for that. All right, so if we keep on moving through that, I really feel like he is saying to us there is about to be a lot of massive change. Now, we got a huge summary document of like 70 changes they proposed. At the top of that document didn't say all of the rules were going to be changed, right? So everyone should be ready as soon as this comes out to read it, look for impacts to your business, your company, how's your cultivation, you yourself as a patient, etc., and provide comments and feedback immediately, including things like, hey, this is going to impact my business. I need time to do it. Hey, this is going to impact my business. I don't think that I can do it. It will cause me to have to completely rebuild my building, and that's unfair. Whatever it happens to be, even if you're like, wow, I really like the new rule. It's much easier for me to understand. That kind of feedback is important, and everybody should be putting it out there. I know I'm going to do it, and I'll go section by section, line by line if I have to, right? Because it's important that we do that. And if we don't do that, if we don't use our voices during public comment periods, right, then you know what we're doing? Then we're saying, regulator, we agree that the rules you've written, they are good. So if you don't read them and you don't comment, I guess you're just agreeing. Certainly I'm going to comment, because I have a feeling that if we don't comment, they're going to think that we like everything. And even if we do comment, they may decide to do it anyway, right? And then we can push back and we can say, hey, I put this comment out here. Why didn't you address it? And again, if you don't show up and have the conversations, nothing happens. All right. Now let's talk about what nothing happens means. And I think this month's from September disciplinary action report is a really good example of this. Okay? Because we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars of fines for not filling out paperwork. Let me repeat that. Tens of thousands of dollars of fines for not filling out paperwork. Okay. Does anyone think that that's the kind of enforcement activity that we should be focusing on? I don't think so. Does not filling out paperwork correctly harm consumers? Does not filling out paperwork correctly make it so consumers don't have safe access? Does not filling out paperwork lead to unsafe working conditions for workers? Maybe. But if I read these, I don't think so. But still, that was what the investigations focused on. That was what the enforcement action focused on. That's what the formal complaints focused on. That's what the fines were written for. Now, if I ask somebody, anybody out there, any viewer, hey, viewers, if you're watching right now, what do you think the CRA should be enforcing against? Would you say not filling out paperwork correctly? Because I don't think that's what anybody would say. But that's what it says across the board. Number one thing was still metric non-compliance. Again, not filling out a database correctly. Not filling out a database correctly with a guide that doesn't really tell you how to do it, with a guide that still tells you how to do it wrong, with a guide that has over 80 bulletins trying to tell you how to do it right, but that often disagree with each other or don't actually function. 5 of the formal complaints were for that. We had 5 for failure to report material changes, also known as not filling out a reporting form to tell the state what you were doing when you were doing it, including in one case, using an additional freezer to store frozen materials. Doesn't seem very dangerous to me, but okay. You know, I could kind of get behind maybe using an unapproved diamond miner because perhaps it wasn't actually safe for the worker that might be using it. But then I thought to myself, we used to do these things in glass jars. And does it say anything about not being safe for workers in the complaint? No. It doesn't mention workers at all. What it says is that a form wasn't completed to ask for permission to do something specific, like using a diamond miner. No mention at all of the humans that might have been impacted by this not following safe procedures form. It was frustrating to me that here we have a complaint and we're still not considering workers, even though the premise of the rule is to keep workers safe. But maybe that's not what the premise of the rule was about to begin with. Another one was for a person who was making decisions as a chief operating officer, but wasn't a supplemental applicant. Again, seems like a paperwork issue to me. Seems like one of those things where you say, oh, you have a new COO? Don't forget to fill out this supplemental applicant. But I feel like what they don't remember is that you don't just fill that out, right? So you create the supplemental application, you submit that, then you got to do a complex amendment. There's a lot of more stuff that goes into it than just saying, oh, this, right? So when they're saying, oh, failure to report a material change because we've hired someone new, now I can appreciate that they don't want people to be making decisions about businesses that they haven't vetted. But then I've also seen them vet a lot of people that probably shouldn't be making any fucking business decisions. I'm probably being a little too judgy about some business owners in the state of Michigan. It just always confuses me. You know, like there are people who have no experience. They haven't ever done anything. Maybe they haven't even run a business before. And, you know, the government could potentially say, hey, they're not actually appropriate for doing this work, but they don't. They just keep letting them go. Do it. Random person. You know, we started hearing about all these licenses that are out there that are burner licenses. It's a license owned by a business, owned by a place, owned by a thing, and it's an organized, like, criminal conspiracy to, when we get shut down in one license, we literally pop right back up in the same location with another. So we're giving a fine to a company that had an employee that was making decisions but not disclosed, but we're still issuing burner licenses that we know are burner licenses all day, every day. Again, is this what we really want people to be focusing on? I don't think so, but maybe this is what people want. Maybe they want to see that, you know? Other issues that they saw on the report, you know, non-compliant sales, which, come on, guys. Like, they've been sending out these messages a long time. I know it's difficult. I know a lot of these point-of-sale systems, like, are not helpful, but, like, you got to figure those things out. At a minimum, you should just be checking it, like, on a weekly basis and just updating shit. Right? Like, come on. Like, it is not that deep. And if you're not, they're going to find you. And they're going to figure it out. Because it's a seed to sale tracking system. And they're going to know. And then you're going to get a fine. And probably it's better for you to spend the money and to not get the fine. You know, I don't think that people should be getting fines for this kind of stuff. Because I think these kinds of things are normal occurrences. Right? Point of sale systems messing up. Getting a wrong SKU here or there. You know, one bud tender not doing something correct, but they don't think of it like that, right? They're giving tens of thousands of dollars of fines. They're shutting places down for, you know, 3 to 10 to 30 days. It's unpleasant. And again, if they keep treating us like criminals, what's going to happen is that we won't be able to compete with ourselves. And when that happens, the traditional market will come back with a fury and take over because there won't be enough of us to satisfy the demand in the state of Michigan. But, you know, I could be confused about how all of these things happen. I mean, I just don't want us to become California, where they wrote the rules so strictly that nobody could actually make money in California. So the traditional market thrived, drowned out that, and now they have to come in with lots of police and the budgets for all those police and all the prison money to take care of that issue, and it's still not even helping. It's still not even helping, right? Like, clearly that doesn't work. There has to be a better way. The better way, I think, making it fair, making it equitable so that everybody who wants to participate can, making the burden to getting in pretty easy, right? Like, literally, if you are not harming consumers, then there should be no other rules. Like, we should get rid of, like, all this other crap, all the video cameras and the ridiculous faults, like, all of that stuff. Okay, this is not nuclear waste, and if it was, we wouldn't have these controls anyway. And you probably would think that you should. Okay, so that's really what we had for today, guys. I didn't get any questions from anybody recently, so I don't have anything for the Ask Me Anything. I see that there are some viewers out there, so guys, now is the time. If you want to ask, and, you know, tell me what's up, I am here to answer your questions. But yeah, that's really what we have. We don't, you know, there's not been too much happening on Capitol Hill, which is probably, again, because of the election. You know, not a lot happens in, like, the last 30 days before a big election like this that isn't literally just the candidates, like, yelling at each other, which we covered earlier. So that's really what we have. Okay. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in, and I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. All right, so what is happening for next week's adventure? Guys, I just want to tell you that there's lots going on here in Michigan. So we might head down to Detroit, get to talk to more retail operators. We might also head to the Upper Peninsula and see how things are happening up there, especially with the new vape ban. One of the big things that has happened previously when we changed things down here is that people in the Upper Peninsula have difficulty getting things delivered to them to fix issues that they've had, so they start running out, which puts a real wrench twist onto all of the cannabis consumers that are in the area. So we might go up and see that, depending on if we can find somebody who wants to talk to us about that up there. And then we've got potentially those new rules coming out, and if they do, then I will say right here, and I will be reading them line by line with you, talking about it, what kind of opinions, and making a call to action to get things changed, because when those come out, we have 30 days to put in our thoughts, and 30 days seems like a long time, but really, we know it's not. All right, so only time and weather conditions will tell. You know, clearly I'm not going to go up to the Upper Peninsula if it's like having a blizzard or something, but I don't think that it will. And hopefully, though, I might be doing all of the above. All right, so thank you guys ever so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Vampire 66613. We are coming to you live from Michigan here in the United States. Thank you for coming by the stream. And today we're talking about national cannabis news. So we just finished our segment, and we're getting ready to close it out with our Ask Me Anything. So now is the time. Ask me anything. All right, no questions from the audience, so I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope that you enjoy the fall weather if you are here in Michigan. All right, bye.